welcome to Chapter 21 on personal selling. Okay. Again, my name is Shane Boyer, and this is Melissa Weekman, and we will be covering Chapter 21. And so welcome, and we're going to get going. Before we get going, though, I'm just going to briefly talk real quickly about personal selling in general as part of the communications process. It's a dyadic communications process, basically 2 or more people. So personal selling is just making sure we're talking to each other and not necessarily doing it through the internet or ads in the newspaper or whatever. So personal selling is between 2 or more people, and most people think of salespeople as that salesperson one-on-one, the car salesman or the insurance salesman, but there's much more to it, especially in the business world and as we look at the integrated marketing field. So we're going to really focus a lot here on more so the business to business, not necessarily the personal selling of like an insurance agent or real estate agent, those types of selling. That's their business and they're out there selling. But we're going to kind of take it from the whole integrated marketing aspect of a company. A lot of times you start out with 4 questions that you really want to think about. Getting that, what's the information exchanged? What are the opportunities to advertise and the effectiveness of it, and then the cost. In personal selling, there's a lot of cost to that, and we'll get into that as we get going here a little bit. The one thing I do want to mention is the stages of personal selling. And the sales jobs, there's much more than just asking people for money or asking them to buy something. And it's in the book, it talks about different aspects of being, you hear marketing, the four P's of marketing, but you could almost think of this as the 5 P's of personal selling. And I'm just going to list them real quick because I think it's good for people to know: the provider, persuader, prospector, problem solver, and the procreator. And you can look at those in a different term as well, and what are the roles. And so in more layman's term, it's finding the customers. That's the first one. Locating customers, determining what they want, recommending how we can satisfy those wants, what those problems are that people are looking for. Then we want to demonstrate what our product does or our service. What do we do? And so those are the main ones, and then you get right into the closing of the sale, make that. And then a lot of times one thing people forget in that personal selling is the follow-through. That 6th aspect is really an important one that's left out, and making sure that we follow up with that. So, so why don't we go ahead and we'll start in with the pros and cons of this, and what we're going to do is just outline. We'll just kind of go back and forth on some pros and cons, and there's 5 of each.
5 each.
And we'll just kind of go from there as we just kind of talk about each one of them.
All right. Okay. Great. So I guess start off with the first pro, which is 2-way interaction with the prospect. I guess the main points I got out of that was just as a seller, you can determine the impact of your message. You know how they're responding, and you get to have that face-to-face interaction with them. And along with that, you can see how they're reacting to that and comprehend how they are taking the message and make sure that they're understanding it the right way. And you can immediately solve problems if they're going to come about. If they don't understand something, you can kind of work with that. So just interaction both ways, talking with them, face-to-face kind of thing.
Yeah, that feedback is so important to understand what they're looking for, what their problems are, and to be able to handle it right there. So that is definitely a big pro to personal selling.
Right.
One of the other ones is if you look at that feedback, and it's looking at tailoring the message. And so now you've got different customers, and you can say, okay, we're going to come in at this angle with this person or this customer, and so you can really address those specific concerns, and you get that feedback, and then maybe next time when you come back in to talk to them, you can be very specific and tailor that message to those people. The one thing when you move closer onto the deal, you can tailor it. Sometimes you can just feel that they're not really ready to buy yet. And so you might just hold off, and that's the whole tailoring part of the whole process of that. And they just might not be ready or to make that
which kind of builds off that first point too of interaction with that prospect. You're having the interaction, so you're able to gauge their responses and then tailor that message to how they're responding to it too. So another pro, just lack of distraction. If you look at it in contrast to mass advertising that isn't person to person, personal contact. you know, if it's a TV commercial or something, they can be very distracted, you know, oh, it's a commercial, I'll go do something else or be working on something else during the commercials or something like that. But when you're person to person, you have to be listening to the person talking
right.
to you. So
Yeah.
that's lack of distraction
Yeah,
is a big
yeah.
pro
You can
too.
get someone in that room alone and tell them, or get your product right in front of them.
They're focused on you and
Yeah.
the message.
Yeah, that is really a good point of that, the eliminating the distractions.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and I've had some businesses where the salesperson has been involved in the decision-making process. You know, and I think that really helps. This is another a pro of being a personal seller. They actually become involved and say, okay, this might be better for you, and so they're really, you know, again, tailoring it to you. I think there's one real big word about all of that, and that's trust. Okay, as a salesperson, you want your client to trust you, and you rely on them. They know the product, they know what's out there, and how you can solve that. And so that's I think as a salesperson, if you can gain the trust of your customers, that's really really important there. And you know, in that involvement in the decision process, you're able to bring out new products and, you know, and be a part of, you know, the whole thing. And people, as a customer, they really appreciate that.
Right.
Okay, here's a new product that might help you with this, and not necessarily always looking out for the money part.
And that trust kind of leads into them being able to rely on that salesperson too, like feeling like you're kind of on the same team as opposed to you're talking at me and I have to defend myself kind of thing. So that trust, like you said, a huge thing. So. Then source of research information, Salesforce, you know, people going out there and doing the selling person to person, they're going to be able to pick up on a lot of things that you might not see for your industry, for your firm, whatever. You know, Salesforce can be the eyes and ears of your company. They are going to be seeing the competition. They're going to be seeing people's reactions to things, and they can take that information back to the company and use that to, you know, create better marketing or better personal sales. So.
Yeah, that is a great point. Much information as you can gather, the better, you know, informed you are in your company, and you just got to be careful on some of the crossing the lines on some of that, and we'll maybe touch on that, you know, a little bit there as well. You know, the manufacturing company is one of those that really, you know, a lot of times you need to talk to the people right on the front line, you know, what's working for you, and a lot of times it's not necessarily the president or the operations manager or whatever, it's actually the person using the machine that says, well, if you had this handle here, or you were able to do this, and they could, you know, make better products, or you know, those
getting
things.
that information from the people actually doing it or using the products, definitely.
Yeah. So so those are kind of like 5 pros, okay, and then, you know, as we move into some of the cons, you know, I look at probably the main thing of personal selling is the inconsistency.
Right.
Okay, you might go out and sell it one way, and I might go out and sell it, you know, another way. You know, it's one of those things that people, you want to sell it, and you want to stay consistent within your company, but yet at the same time, they might not have all the information. You hope they do, or they don't process it. And then they go out and try to sell it before they know all the information, or just get different messages. So I think that's a big part of that, especially in bigger companies where you have a number of different reps that are part of that. You know, I'm going to mention one thing about that is, which is good, and we'll talk about it probably a little bit later, but it's a lot of the leave-behinds, you know, brochures and stuff like that. Once you get into that, and that will help with that inconsistency.
Exactly,
Part of that, so, yeah.
So, you know, like along with that, another con might be inconsistency from the sales force to the management or the marketing staff. You know, the marketing staff, they have a certain way that they want that message to be conveyed, and if the sales force isn't necessarily conveying that message in that way, it could cause some conflict. You know, the salespeople saying, well, this is how I'm selling it, my goal is to sell, and the management's saying, well, the goal is to get this message out, and if that message isn't consistent, then that's going to cause conflict in your business, which is, you know, not good for any company. So
even beyond that, and you hope it doesn't happen, but there's a lot of times people are jealous of salespeople, and there's the conflicts. A lot of times the salespeople make more than their managers, you know, especially if they're on a commission base, and so there could be conflicts there, and as well, and so you've got to, you know, kind of watch that as well as you get into that, you know, and another big kind of leads into this next point, the conflict of the high cost of personal selling. You know, that's one of the things that Managers will butt up against the salespeople a lot too. You want to take care of your customers, but for one person to go out and sell an item to one person, you know, there's costs. You might have to drive, you know, 200-300 miles to make a
Right.
sale for one item.
Yeah, stay in a hotel and,
Yeah.
you know, fly somewhere, whatever it takes. Yeah,
So
it's
there,
high
so there
cost.
are a lot of high costs that are involved with that. But then, you know, in business to business, a lot of times there's huge accounts. It might be $1 million account or you know whatever, and you need to spend money to you know
make
to
money.
get there, and so that's all a part of that. You know, and like I said, the commissions a lot of times how it's structured. Salespeople a lot of times they want that commission, you know, instead of a base salary. Maybe they have a smaller base salary, but then high commission.
Right.
And I know a lot of college students come out, they get offered a lot of commission jobs right out of college.
Definitely.
But it's always nice to have that base and that. So with commissions, that's, you know, that's a part of it.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, kind of moving into the next con as far as the reach or the scope of personal sellers, because of the high costs, you can't have an unlimited amount of that sales force. So, you know, mass communications, you know, TV, advertising, radio, that's gonna hit a larger number of people. So, it's a little bit of a drawback to personal selling. You're not going to hit as high of a number of people, and then along with that, because the sales force has to hit so many people, those people aren't going to be hit as often as they might be with a commercial that airs every day or a radio ad that airs every hour, whatnot. So that poor reach might be a con for personal selling.
Yeah. I know one of the things salespeople get, you know, some good salespeople, they really manage their time well. But that's another thing, you know, if you think an 8-hour-a-day salespeople, that's all they have if it's a normal work. But a lot of salespeople will do other things. They might take clients golfing or, you know, or they'll go meet them after work or, you know, and things like that. You're always kind of working, but the personal selling is very limited by time. And so that's, you know, you only have so many hours in a day, and I think that's a big part of that.
Right.
You know, in leading into that kind of that thing, taking people golfing or whatever, it might lead into one of the fifth con here is the ethical issues that are kind of part of that. And, you know, whether it be, you know, on the extreme end, bribery, you know, you'll see some of that. But even on a smaller level of, you know, how much do you give other people trips and, you know, things like that, your clients, how much do you take care of them?
How often do you take them golfing?
Yep, and so, yeah, that's, always, a lot of those salespeople, they like it because they get to go out golfing. There was one, in the book there, talked about, 25% of salespeople thought about giving at least $100 to someone to buy sometime. And, you know, that's, do you really want to just give them money to buy something and those types of things? You know, meals and trips and events, all of those things kind of add in there. And, you know, lobbying efforts, even in the political realm, you know, I think politics is, you know, there's all these
Lots
lobbying,
of selling there.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
One of the ones, a couple of them that have changed over the course, one in particular is the pharmaceutical sales.
Okay.
They used to really, the salespeople were always giving doctors all kinds of, whether it be meals or gifts and all these different types of things. And that industry is really cut back. It's really monitored now where you can't do that as much. And so, you know, the salespeople, you know, it's hard to get into the doctors. Yes, they're busy and this and that. It is hard to get into them. And then the doctors from the old time, well, I used to get all this free stuff and I don't get it anymore.
Yeah.
So it has changed stuff. And even in the old days of something as simple as radio, there was a concept called payola. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but payola is when the disc jockeys would take money and stuff like that to play certain records.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, kind of going into this ethical. It's
Ethical
kind of a
issues.
personal selling, so someone out there touting a record and then giving the DJ, you know, money on the side to do that. So you just got to be careful of all that. And, you know, I know, like, in the book there, it also talked about how companies now are, you know, about 20% of them are going into surveillance means.
Right.
And
Some way of monitoring them so that they're making sure that they are abiding by the ethical issues or ethical things that are.
yeah, bending the rules is
Yep.
one that, okay. Well, that's kind of our first section on personal selling and some pros and cons.
Yes. All right, so again, in Chapter 21, Personal Selling, we're going to talk a little bit more in this section about personal selling in conjunction with other parts of integrated marketing communications, so with advertising, public relations, direct marketing, sales promotion, internet, so basically how they kind of can combine in there.
Yeah.
First of all, with advertising, personal selling and advertising, sometimes they can be seen as like competitors or different ways of doing things, but really when used in conjunction, they can work out really well for a company. As far as advertising can be used in the early stages of marketing to get the word out, get the name out, get the idea in people's heads, and then in the later stages, move on to the personal selling so that they've heard of it, so they might have a little interest, and then the personal sellers might have some more information there. And as far as they can compensate for each other's weaknesses, where one might lack, the other can move in and help with that. So.
Yeah, it definitely does increase the sales, and it also can kind of go vice versa as well. As an example, Angie's Kettle Corn. You know, my uncle, my dad's twin brother, he's goofy, but one of the things he does is they just got back from Texas and with Angie's in Houston and San Antonio, whatever. But they were out giving samples out, and they were kind of doing the personal selling, and then on the back end, and then it comes to the more of the mass marketing of Angie's, and now. But they had to get that sample in front of them, you know. Get people to try it, because if you just see a bag on the shelf, you know, what really, you know, so they're out there just really kind of doing that personal selling, and so it can kind of go both ways. You need some personal selling sometimes at the beginning, and a lot of times small products are like that. If you have a new product, you want to sell it to, say you have a new piece of sports equipment to help a soccer team or a baseball team, softball. So you come up with it and you want to sell it to a few of the local teams and the schools, and people get to use it, and then it can go more of a national reach. And so both the advertising and personal selling can go back and forth to help each other out.
Yeah.
The second one on this is personal selling with public relations. This is kind of a fun one.
Yeah.
Getting involved with the community. You know, you're not really making a sell, but pulling in that as well. Can you think of any examples that did you on the personal selling?
As far as public relations, I mean, I guess just kind of things that the book mentioned about, Salesforce being that form of representing. So going out and doing community service work or, volunteering kind of things. So those are ways that the Salesforce can become part of the public relations firm as well. So.
Yeah, there's aspects like, the volunteering, whether it be Kiwanis or the JC's Club, Habitat for Humanity.
Heard a lot of Feed My Starving Children kind of thing, yeah.
And so you're making connections, and there's a lot of people that do it as part of the personal selling. You see a lot of bankers and attorneys and, people like that are out and about in the community, but just making connections, but it's, it's part of it, and it's that good name for the company.
Right, that good reputation. Yeah, I know some companies are even building it into like how their business is structured, saying, we'll pay you for these 2 hours just to go and work, volunteer or something. So just seeing the value in that public relations and how that can affect your personal sales. And
that's a great point there. Do you want to take the next one, kind of like on direct marketing, or?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Sure. So personal selling and direct marketing. So mostly what the book talked about as far as direct marketing goes was telemarketing and how that affects the sales force. Telemarketing is kind of a form of personal selling in a way, because it is person to person, not necessarily face to face, because it would be over the phone. But it's cheaper than personal selling, going out face to face. And they use it a lot right now as more of a screening process. So the telemarketers will call and find out who's interested. I'm sure they get hung up on a lot too, but find out who's interested and then pass those names on to the personal sellers, and that sales force will go out and they have a smaller, group of people to talk to, and will have a higher success rate then. So it improves the efficiency of that company. So those two work well together.
Yeah. You look at the in-house and in-house sales and then the salespeople. Yeah, they definitely do need to work together. I look at a lot of. We just had in one of my other classes someone come in from the Timberwolves. And, I know most professional sports, they start out, your first job's probably going to be in-house sales, picking up the phone and calling companies, for season tickets and calling people. and then they move up within that. But again,
Yeah.
it's just like you said, it generates leads to where, you know, what they're looking for.
Right, and it doesn't have to be telemarketing either. You know, there's other forms of direct marketing like emails or even just a mailing through snail mail, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of different ways of that direct marketing to help with the screening process
Yeah.
for the personal selling.
Yeah.
So
And it does, like you said, it keeps the price down, which is important.
yeah,
You know, one of the other things is the sales promotion part, combining that with, that's one of the next ones with personal selling. And again, it's a way to get in the door a lot of
Yeah.
times, you know, or even bring back another customer. Okay, we've got this, you know, we got this sale or we got this promotion going on. You know, I think it's a good time to buy, you know,
Right.
and so it gives the salesperson something to talk about.
Yep.
You know, like for, you know, my company is, you know, the Sports Institute, a lot of times the radio stations would, you know, come, we've got this great, you know,
Right,
we're
yeah.
doing this thing like I think I always remember this one, it was kind of a fun one, it was a limousine with kids and, you know, and we'll be advertising it in all the high schools and stuff like that, it was a drawing and, you know, but it was a way for them to approach me because our
Yeah.
clientele was kids
Right.
and so there was a sales promotion that they were doing within the radio station.
Okay.
But it was a way to sell more airtime for them. And so that
Right.
was, you know, kind of an example of that, you know, and, you know, some of the other things with sales promotion and, you know, I would always, when I was back in development or even, you know, at the Sports Institute, I would always carry things in my car. I remember I'd always have sleeves of golf balls, you know,
Yeah.
with the business logo on it. And, you know, you know, just, a lot of times you have those things that you have in your trunk of your car, and that's the sales people are always
Right.
trying to do that. And but even again, not necessarily to the client, but there's also sales promotions for the seller too.
Right, yep.
Yeah, where they can, the top salesperson of the month gets a trip to Cancun,
Yeah.
or you know, those types
Incentives.
of things. You know, and sales incentives. Yeah, that are, you know, bonuses are always great, but a lot
Right.
of times they can work with companies to get a cheaper flight. You know,
yeah.
we're gonna buy a flight, send you to Cancun, and
Right.
instead of giving them money.
And I think these promotional materials too kind of help counteract that con of that inconsistent message because you know those promotional materials are all going to be the same across the board for every member of the sales force, so that will help
Yeah,
with that too.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The last one, kind of, you know, we've talked about advertising, public relations, marketing, promotions, and then the one that's out there all the time now, it seems like, is the internet.
Yes, so huge right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, the internet is a great resource. You know, pretty much every company has a website of some sort to put out there for people to see. So that's a good place for people to get initial information. It helps the sales force in the fact that people might have a better idea of what the product is all about in the beginning. And along with that, like the direct marketing, it can screen prospects. Prospects might put their name and number in to
Right.
get more information, so that'll provide a client for that sales force. So lots of different things with the internet too.
Yeah, you know, and with the internet, you know, there's all these aspects of, just it makes the salesperson's job a lot easier. You
Yeah.
can put things in there. You know, I was just on a webinar the other day, you know, webinars and, you know, videos on YouTube and, you know, a salesperson could, you know, send out a link to someone and say, you know, go check out, you know, our new product on this YouTube site or
Yeah.
whatever it might be. And so being able to combine the internet with personal selling, there's a lot there, and it's just going to keep growing with the new technologies, with
Right.
smartphones. And you look at, I think some of the things that have really popped out lately, like the little scan boxes. You know,
Yeah,
the little
with the
things you hold-
smartphone scanner,
Hold
yeah.
your phone up there and scan it, and then it pops up to their website. Or
Exactly.
Scan the barcode and see how much prices are and compare them to other
Yep.
stores. And it's just amazing and what's going to happen, you know, in the future.
Right.
You're going to know. I mean, the knowledge base is out there.
Exactly.
and
So much information available on the web.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we talked, we'd been mentioning a little earlier about the political realm and politics and how, I mean, if you look at all those things we just talked about, advertising, public relations, and direct marketing, and sales promotion, internet, you know, and right now coming up, you know, with the elections next November,
Yeah.
they're utilizing all of this.
Right.
But it's a personal selling. It's that candidate that's out there. He's out there, him or her is out there stomping the grounds, but they're using all these other things as
Right.
well. So, so that's kind of how we can bring in personal selling with
Yeah.
the integrated marketing mix.
Yes. All right, so now we're moving on to Chapter 22. Chapter 22 is about the regulation of direct marketing. So talk a little bit about how direct marketing is regulated today.
Yeah, that is, it needs to be regulated, but yet at the same time, the people with the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, are always fighting that. You know, what is the, when it comes to that First Amendment, what isn't, obscene or, going against, slander, all these other aspects that are out there. And so, so that freedom of speech, but then there's also the commercial speech part of it as well. It's kind of the same thing, but companies have that freedom as well, not just people, but it's companies as well. And so you look at it, there's really three aspects to look at in regulation. There's the self, the state, and the federal. The self is probably easiest. I don't know, did you kind of look into that at all? Or
A little bit, just mostly it means to regulate and control advertising, helps you to maintain consumer trust and confidence, which is so big in any company. If your consumer doesn't trust you, they're probably not going to buy your product.
Right.
So it's also viewed as a way to limit government interaction and interference and control over your advertising. So basically kind of if you can control yourself, then you don't have to answer as much to the federal, state governments. So.
Yeah. There's aspects like the Better Business Bureau, trade associations, a lot of them, they do a lot of the self-regulation as well. And so, I think that's a big part, and we hope that people want to go along the lines of
the
self-regulation. But then there's times when the state and the federal need to step in there. And it, the media is a big part of this, and a lot of times media want to push it. Especially you look at different networks. Some will take it a little further than others, and some will regulate it a little bit more. And but in the state, again, that's specific to whatever state you might be in. They might have different laws. The federal laws, a lot of times there will be less, but the state laws will come in and say, okay, we need to put a little bit more regulation on this. And so, liquor industries, they monitor themselves, a lot of those aspects as well. Just going back as far back when it comes to government-wise, back all the way to 1914 was going back to the Federal Trade Commission, allowing the legal action and have you ever heard of a number of how much they could be charged if they? It could
up to $11,000 just for one call that's on the do not call list.
And so. So when they get in there, and that's part of the whole telemarketing aspect, that do not call. Everyone loves to, loves the do not call.
Exactly,
you don't want to be getting calls during supper time when you're doing that. One of the other aspects of the do not call list, it's the 900 numbers, and a lot of laws behind that especially towards kids, because it's you're automatically billed when you call that number, and so that's one of the things that is monitored a lot and highly regulated, and you don't want kids calling and picking up and calling a 900 number and doing
just
that.
Get charged for it.
Yep. So that is one of the things that is in there. And that kind of goes into the internet too, especially with the kids. The marketing of the internet, and the internet probably pushes it more than the regular advertising, but there is a lot there as well. The spamming, everyone hates spam, and there's new laws on spamming, and how many people can you copy, and how many can you send out emails, and and those types of things. And but the big thing is identifying people, identifying who you are and selling it. That's a if you're up front, a lot of times you'll be pretty good with that. But those, just a lot of them anti-spamming. A lot of the states are kind of going on their own. Not necessarily. There's some federal regulation, but more so with the states when it.
And I think the big thing too is just finding that balance between the different regulations. I know they like you said, so many people are going against these things, saying they're against our First Amendment rights and whatnot, but at the same time, these things are harming people, so you have to find that regulation to a point that it's helpful, but it's not hindering the First Amendment rights. So that's a tough balance to find, I think.
I think one of the ones, and they even make fun of themselves, especially when it first came out, was the GoDaddy ads, like on the Super Bowl, where they're in the courtroom actually battling the freedom of speech and all of that, and so that's part of the you know, where they're pushing the limits and going out there. But it's not even necessarily them. There's also, you know, concerning the Super Bowl, you know, ads like Tim Tebow and you know, who that was sponsored by, and, you know, the nonprofits, and, you know, there was all kinds of controversy in between that. You know, they kind of played it. They didn't, you know, Tim Tebow and his mom, they didn't come out and say exactly what, they just talked about their lives, and so, but people are upset about that because it is a regulated industry when it comes to that. And so, a couple things, you know, it goes back into the 1970s is when the Federal Trade Commission really made it a top priority for false and misleading aspects. And so those are, you know, the unfairness and deceptiveness. And I think unfairness is, you know, is it going to cause harm, you know, both physically and psychologically. You know, that's a big part of it. You know, there's a term out there called puffery, you know, where they, you know, what is it? And Pizza Hut and Domino's were in a big lawsuit, and that was kind of mentioned in the book that they kind of talked about that issue. And so those are a lot of the things. There's even blogging is regulated. I don't know if you know that or not, but you know, if there's a blog out there, but you're representing a company, you have to say in the blog, you know, like if you reply to someone, a comment, or, you know, here's a great product, you have to disclose that you work for that company when you write that comment back or whatever. Otherwise, they can be fined and stuff like that. So that even blogging is regulated. And I know people really, you know, try to get around that and say, you know, so there's a salesperson out there, you know, someone writes something about a product, and then someone replies to them on a blog and says, you know, here's another great product that's, you know, I had and I've used, I bought, but it's really a salesperson. And so that you can't do that. And so, you know, again, here's this internet and the whole mobile app type stuff. Where are we going to go with this, and how we're going to keep getting things pushed to us on the
It's kind of examples of how regulation is good, you know. You don't want to be deceived and look for reviews online for something and see all these reviews from the makers of the thing and not know that that's who they are. So,
you know, and it's in the next few years too. In my opinion, I think it's going to keep coming out, and even more so with like Facebook and Twitter. And, you know, here's some free services, but they're making a lot of money on selling ads. And but they're gaining information about you, and, you know, it sees what you're typing, and then the ads pop up on the side, and invasion of privacy. I mean, how far is all of this going to be taken? And so, you know, can they store, what kind of data can they store, and, you know, different companies' email servers and stuff like that. So we'll keep watching it and see where all this goes with regulations and how that changes. It's, you know, it used to be what was on TV and what was in the newspaper. Now you've got all these new applications that you've got to be aware of. So.
And even in like the industry of the telemarketing, with the do not call list, in the book it mentions something about how, you know, they fought against that and didn't want to have the do not call list because obviously they want to be able to call and reach a larger number of people, but it hasn't necessarily been bad for that industry. The telemarketers have still been able to reach the people who want to talk to them, which again, with the screening process, you know, if they want to talk to them, then that's good for them. So, you know, even though they fought against it, it's actually not been a bad thing for their industry. So,
Well, good. Any last thoughts on anything that you want to wrap up here with these chapters? They're interesting on personal selling, and then, you know, the regulations of advertising.
Yeah, I guess just the most interesting thing for me for 21, the personal selling, just how they all work together and complement each other, the different aspects of integrated marketing, and just this regulation of direct marketing. I think just the balance, finding that balance of what's right and what's too far is the tough thing to figure out. So
probably one of the things that you know, people always give the personal selling, the salesperson, a bad name. And yes, there's a lot of bad salespeople out there that bend the rules and they're out there, but it's part of business, and there's a lot of good salespeople.
Right.
So you don't want to look bad on it, and it's also a very good field to go in if you know. You know, they definitely make a lot of money, and that's part of it.
Lots of opportunity there.
Lots of opportunities, and a lot of times you have to have that inner drive. You know, you've got to be able to take no for an answer all the time. You know, if you get 1 out of 10, great. You know, And so yeah, you've got to have all those types of skills. And so, well, thank you for recapping this, and hopefully the rest of the class can learn a little bit about
Yeah.
this and do well on their quiz.
I'm sure it will go
Okay.
well.
All right. Okay, all right, well, thanks.
Thanks.